Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GAN's processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And thank you, Alex, for joining us. We look forward to your presentation.
And thank you very much for bringing us to this point, Mark. Let's see here. I get it. Well, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. As we always say, one of the reasons this particular meeting is so powerful is because of the representation that we have from around the world. And it's very important because it follows up the Thursday classes that go around the world and the Friday classes coming from Brazil. And we welcome everyone to the KAKT American Knowledge Team meeting of 2025. Yes, it's a very special day for a lot of people, but it's always a special day at the KAKT Foundation. This is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. We're discussing advanced inertia. The topic is migration. My name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is April the 20th of 2025. This is part of the KAKT Foundation North America Plasma Education Series. So I thank you all for being here because we are all students, but we also want to be teachers. And we really can't pretend about that. We have to stay within our ways and means. And what we've been trying for the last 4 years is to condense the teaching in such a manner that we don't have to go through the thousands of hours of teaching unless we want to. And even still, it's ended up being hundreds of hours of teaching. So it really puts a lot of pressure on us, especially as longtime knowledge seekers, you know, to be able to distill the subject down to its current affairs. And yet for the new knowledge seekers, this is quite a revelation, and it is definitely overwhelming. I think all of us have gone through that, and the good news is that we've all survived that, and we need to move on, but we don't need to leave anybody behind. We can bring along whoever we want to bring along, and this is the point. We have to do it our way, not someone else's way, someone else's teaching, but it has to be sincere teaching. It has to be in keeping with the universal laws. And so in that point, we have to discriminate what we call universal laws and what we see as man-made laws, because those laws put us on the hesitancy highway it is the lowest energy state. And, as we point our wagon trains westward, we don't want to let the tumbleweeds slow us down, but, we don't have any tracks to follow. In fact, we leave a lot of wagon wheels behind because we were the pioneers. And of course, we had to shield ourselves from who is slinging arrows. And the big dilemma now is how to migrate to the gold or to the density of the gold. And is there a difference? So going back to 1849, we had the 49ers with the gold rush. But today there's a different kind of gold rush. And so this sets up a new path. So we are on the search for outer space. And the reason is because in the technology that is generally accepted, we've never been to outer space. We refer to outer space as being outside of Earth space, but that is not outer space. That's just another space. And it has a certain density. And in Earth space, we have a certain density. But with that density, as we rotate around the sun, we creep along. And this is our plasma highway to our little pie in the sky. And that's the problem. That little pie keeps getting smaller and smaller, and we ignore the big pie. So our small pie is our small scheme, and the big pie, well, we just don't want to consider it. And yet, here we are, slinging arrows and becoming, in the process, more dense. And what does that mean, to be more dense? So as we discovered, it's a difficult subject to broach because, as we see in book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation of Matter, it brings together the subject by Marin Tavakolikesh of the matter, dark matter, and antimatter. And that is something that most of us in the physical science will relate to. But what is hard to relate is that those coming togethers of the universal matter came together someplace and then came together in another place. And there's a connection. And we see in book number 2, the structure of the light is the connection. And then, of course, once we have that connection, how do we progress from there? And this is why we see in book number 3, The Origin of the Universe, where that Magrav universal matter splits up into 2 different Magravs, 2 different matters. But we're talking about advanced inertia today, which is really the advanced basic understanding of inertia, where 2 fields come together to create one. And yet the book number 3 talks about one field breaking up to create 2. But we have to understand that whether it's coming together or whether it's splitting apart, it is a form of creation. And we understand that the destruction is also a form of creation, but we're talking about a peaceful creation and a manifestation of that creation. And so that becomes the difficult subject, because here we are after 374 weeks bringing together with Rick Raman and the Universal Council the understanding of one planet, one nation, one race for justice and world peace. And so as we all, wave our flags and want to promote our own nationality, maybe promote our own religious belief, as we migrate from here to there or from wherever, we're all doing this on the same planet, and it's our planet. So it's not my planet as opposed to your planet. It's not your planet as opposed to my planet. It's our planet. It's one planet. So it doesn't matter how you go around, you come to the same spot. And we're all one nation and we're all one race. And so that's the beauty of life. And it's wonderful. And this happens to be Easter around the world. And one of the traditions, of course, is to paint our eggs. We like to make decorations. So when we look at the earth and we see how its decorations include laminations and striations and a various kind of density formations. And of course, everybody's favorite, the golden goose eggs. And then there are these other eggs, fields, matter fields, and plasma fields. And they're all part of the decorations of this planet. And that's what makes it so wonderful. So the thing about it is that there are other fields of emanations, and they too have layers and combinations and directions and connections and interactions. And so we want to address partially the difference this week, and we'll conclude next week. But the point of the matter is that there are decorations. And so whether you can see them or you can't see them, they are there. And one of the decorations that we have is our emotions, which we call the aura. And it shows everything, doesn't it? Everything that we need to know, because it's all part of the density momentum. So the inertia is a density where fields come together through what we've been calling in the last few weeks the falling, the acceleration, either adding to or diminishing from. And so we see one field of a rotation and we have another field of another rotation. And when they come together, they could create a black hole. And in this black hole, it's very dense, very gravitational. So we see the gravity seeks density. But the magnetical also seeks density. And so how is that possible? It's creating kind of a conflict point, isn't it? Or is it creating a binding zone? In other words, that point, that black hole, is a coming together of a lot of density. And it's coming together from all sides. And if it's coming together from all sides, then it has to be balanced off from all sides as well. And that's the topic today, to understand that in the plasma rules, the higher strength feeds the weaker strength, as opposed to the higher strength eats the weaker strength. And so this binding zone could be a point of conflict, or it could be a point of binding. And so it depends on your point of view, and it depends on how you feel about that. And when we talk about feeling, we're talking about emotional feeling. So we find that a lot of us don't understand that we need to be binding our energy. It's very self-serving. That's kind of important. Self-serving is very important as opposed to having others serve you, because no one knows what your needs are. So we have to be truthful. And our needs are not what others need. So it doesn't make sense that we are self-serving at the expense of others, because they have those needs as well. And so whether it's a humanity or whether it's a carrot, the binding of energy is essential. and the universe provides. So why are we stealing at the expense of others? And speaking of stealing, we've been given 10 commandments. I don't see the 10 commandments for dogs, or cows, or for tulips, or for roses. And then on top of that, we found another 14 missing commandments. Altogether, 24 commandments. We need these commandments. We needed to have these commandments when we arrived. These commandments were given to us because we needed it. So if you need it, it means it was absent. Do you really need a commandment? Thou shalt not lie? Do you really need that? So the question then becomes is, can you lie to someone and believe that? Well, the hope is, of course, that they believe you're lying. But what is the truth about the lie? The truth is that you know that you're lying. So can you lie without consequences? Because clearly, by lying to someone else, you want to impart some consequences to them. And so this becomes a real problem, because not only do you have to be more devious, deceitful to lie, but you now have to be more concerned to not have the lie exposed, which of course consumes energy. So if we want to maintain our density, we need to be self-serving. And if in that process of being self-serving, we lie, then we need to be more self-serving. And therefore we need to be more dense. And so the whole process of just violating this one commandment, if we can call it a violation, causes a migration towards density, because it's something you have to hold on to. And therefore, you have to make sure that that deception continues, and you have to hold on to that as well. So holding on to that deception requires more energy. And so you have to be more dense, because you need that energy. It's a wonder that we've been given these commandments. So is it a commandment to those who don't understand about lying, or is it a commandment to say, justify, you don't lie, I will lie, because if I lie, it needs to be easier for me. And the best way for me to lie is for you to believe, not to believe in the lie, but to believe that I can't lie. And that requires deception. It's almost like a roundabout, a dog chasing its tail, to lie or not to lie. So thou shalt not lie, because I don't want to be found out. It is embarrassing. It causes consternation. It can cause mixed emotions. And it's at the root of our problems. So we don't need to be given these commandments. These commandments are inherent in us. But someone has decided that we need that. And then maybe we accept that because we're not on the transmutation highway. We're on the lowest energy state. And it's not just physicality where we have frequency, but also involves pressure and it involves temperature. It also involves a rotating field. And so when we look at the connection to the rest of the universe, we find that there's another connection on the carbon inertia highway, where we have not just 24 commandments, but we have a mass with respect to the carbon that also has a reference of 24. And so one of the problems that we have is that we only see the carbon 12. And yet when we go up to the transition highway, we see the connection between carbon 14 and carbon 10, the total of which is carbon 24. And when we go to the transmutation highway, carbon 16 plus carbon 8 is also carbon 24. And so when we see the inertia connection, where these two fields come together to create one, it doesn't tell you where that comes from. So whatever you see could be just a reflection or it could be an illusion. And here we are, pioneers in the great Wild West. In outer space, do you know where the West is? Is it up? Is it down? Is it light? Is it dark? Or is it an inertia field, a coming together from two different fields? And that's a discussion. And so coming to the light means coming from the dark. And if there's dark, where is that going? So there's a connection, and it transcends the carbon inertia. And so we see a consistency where when we engage in lying, it creates a chaotic condition. And maybe we just do it randomly. But the damage is consistent. And so what we're trying to do is to come together and look at the practical aspects of it with our life. And today is, being Easter, really focuses on the comparison between the scientific community and the religious community. But either way, it doesn't say what factor is at play. But there's something that is at play here, and it is very consistent, and that is the fact that we have ever-present war. And so it creates a tense relationship. Plasmatically, we say there's a balance between the magnetical and the gravitational in a maggrav condition. But the scientific community has the same thing, has a conservation of magnetic fields versus the conservation of energy. And now the spiritual community, they have a relationship between the spirit and the soul. So these are two different fields. And they operate in very much of a warmongering state. And so today, at least for a few hours, we have a ceasefire in the Ukraine. And so hopefully, and willingly what the plasma science adds to the knowledge is not only to bring peace and prosperity to this planet, but also to affect the rate of change, to affect the tensity relationship and the Magrav condition. And so, which way are we migrating? And are there two directions? Well, yes, they are. And so, two of the directions are to create a balance between a natural creation and natural decay. But there's another two fields, and they also create a natural creation, but they're moved by the natural decay. So we call one inertia field creation field, and another inertia field the decay field. And so there you have two fields, and now that creates another inertia field. And what we can't see is the bonding factor there, so we fudge it. But the point is that is not in the physical state. The manifestation is in the physical inertia, but the creation comes from another intensity. And that intensity migrates to whatever point you direct it to. So that in fact becomes a directed energy. So this inertia field comes to a point of a junction, which is basically indirectly a medium point between one transition matter and another transition matter. And so they create this plasma inertia. But we have to understand that it isn't just 1 + 1 is more than 2. That would take care of one dimension. But as we could see, there are 3 dimensions. And it's not just what we can see. We can create this. And so when we create a Magrav condition, a basic Magrav that we created years ago, what we couldn't see is that there were 2 directions. These directions were magnetical and gravitational. And the rotating fields that they created was based on our point of view. But the thing is, you could go along the field, you could go rotate around the field, and then there was an outer field and an inner field. And so all of them were referenced as magnetical gravitational relationships. And so fundamentally, from your point of view, we find that the magnetical field rotates counterclockwise and the gravitational field rotates clockwise. So we have opposing directions, we have opposing rotations, and we have opposing positions, and yet they come together and they work together. And so we have to understand that every field that we have is a product of these 2 other fields. And whether you accept them or you don't, you still enjoy the product. And whether you understand it or you don't, we know that there's an energy associated with it. And that energy affects us. And so that energy that affects us is affecting our physical disposition. And we call that emotion. So we can change our disposition with our emotion. And our emotion is from our point of view. So what makes you angry and what makes you happy? And so these energies are moving. And because they're always positive, the energy themselves aren't negative or positive. The motion of these energies is negative or positive. And so it's the coming together of the negative and positive. The N for negative and P for positive creates this junction. And this junction is just a transfer state to go from one transition matter to another transition matter. And so where is it going? Well, That's up to you, isn't it? And if we were looking at the sun, we see that its NP junction is coming from the surface and creating a perpendicular motion. And this motion then is a mass. And this mass has a momentum. And then we can see that that momentum is rotating. And in fact, it's stacking in layers. And so the difference between the negative and the positive is that the positive is the higher energy and the negative is the lower energy. So the energy goes from the positive to the negative. But each energy gets into a containment, a rotating field. And that's in the physicality. There is a plasmatic aspect to that physicality. And so it's tied into our emotion. And so when we say in that emotion, it travels along a pathway. And that becomes our emotional control system. And within that, we have to contain our anger, or we have to contain our excitement. But that emotion is our emotion, and it contributes to our field and our physicality, and it contributes to our well-being, our neighbor's well-being, the planet's well-being, etc., continuing in that. So these are all linked together, and that connection then becomes either magnetical or gravitational. It all depends on your point of view, doesn't it? So when we talk about the conservation of momentum, it's that it has to be within some problem domain. We're the problem domain, and that amount of momentum remains constant. So that momentum is neither created nor destroyed, but it's only changed through the action of forces. Well, what force are you prescribing? And so, we attribute some of these forces to Newton's laws of motion, but do we understand the universal laws of motion? And how is that created? And so we played with Ganses, and we played with nanocoding, and of course we played with the atomic state. And so we find that there's a conservation of inertia, which means that there's a balance from a magnetical relationship and a gravitational relationship on that one side, and a magnetical relationship and a gravitational relationship on the other side. So whatever we say is one, whether it be in a Gantt state or a nano state, we're not specifying which one, but that one is an inertia field of two. And then those inertia fields come together and they create two. So coming together of two to create one, and then the coming together of the two ones to create two. And so we understand why there is some confusion. But what we have to understand in the Magrav energy transfer state, there's a balance of the magnetical gravitation overall. So within that context, within that context, we have a Magrav condition, but overall, there is a Magrav condition. And so we have to understand that relationship, because that also contributes to the conservation of energy. And that's what we're discussing today, because we have Magrav pathways. We call them fields of attraction and fields of repulsion. And so they give us a feeding and a feedback, if you will. So the feeding is part of the magnetical field forces represented by the outtensity of the field, whereas the feedback forces are represented by the gravitational field forces deep on the intensity of the fields. And both the electron and the neutron have this, but we all know that the electron is different from the neutron. And here clearly we can see the difference, can't we? I guess it all depends on your point of view. And we've been saying this all along because people don't understand the cups of life and how important they are, because we're bringing together the regular atomic science with the monatomic science and creating the GANS science. And it's all done through the understanding of our inner space where our emotional strength resides. And in that, we create the emotional cup and the physical cup. It stems from our emotional strength. So the two are intertwined, as are all the Ganses. They all become a radiance manifestation of our emotions, not just the CO2 and the calcium GANs, but the zinc and copper. Even water is a GANs, and amino acid is a GANs. And then, of course, we can see we even have the gold GANs. So for all the gold diggers out there, there's hope. And if we include the cup of soul and we find that each one, whether it be an emotional, physical, or the soul cup, has a magnetical gravitational relationship, but collectively, all encompassing, all three together have a magnetical gravitational relationship. So each one is an inertia field, and a combination of all three of them becomes an inertia field. This has always been very hard to understand because we've always been in a battle with me, myself, and I, and be the lonely one. The lonely one, the only one, and you're never alone. Because when we look at the cup of the universe, we have to understand that we have two hemispheres in our brain and they work together. There's a cooperation. Not only do we create the copper GANs, which enhances our physicality, but we create the zinc GANs, which enhances our emotional construct. And then we have the carbogen, which connects to the rest of the universe. And the coming together of these fields of 1 + 1 + 1 creates more than 3, which is our physicality, which is very, very gravitational. And of course, the Earth has its own grand central inertia field where we have different Ganses on the Earth. So we have to understand that the way that we are created, the Earth is created the same way, except that there's a sequence here where the Earth has priority. And so where did all these Ganses come from? Because it certainly didn't come from us, even though we made all these Ganses, but we were able to make those Ganses within the Earth space. And so these Ganses were here actually before us. So that's kind of cool because we know that we have a periodic table of consistency where we have all of these elements coming together and we can see them because we can see the laminations, we can see the striations and the formations, and they are buried in our soil or they're in our environment, whether they be liquid or gaseous, and each of them has a gradient in terms of mass. And so they become more dense. So we start with the hydrogen and we migrate through the periodic table of consistency, identifying the Earth space range details. And the key factor is the density. They become more and more dense. So why are we migrating towards this density? And what is the result of this eventual migration? Well, of course, it's the solid, isn't it? It's the stone. It's the rock. It's the hard-hearted ones, isn't it? It's the darkness, isn't it? More dense. So in the beginning, in this darkness, we had the neutron, which came before the atom and the PM tick, because the atom was created from the neutron. And we said, let there be light. So we created an atom and we created a PM tick, which came from the darkness. And so 1 and 1 and 1 came from 1. So 3 came from 1. So in order to understand the principal matter, we had to understand that the PM ticks came and they came together and they converged. And they converged together and created the antimatter, dark matter, and matter gen, which are different energy states, but they come together to create the one conversion of what we call the plasma gen, which is an inertia field. And it's in a MAGRAV condition, which means it's balanced. And that MAGRAV field has to have an environment. So that environment had to come together to bring together the antimatter, dark matter, and plasma gen, and also go through the same conversion. Now you have these two fields come together and they interact and they create another inertia field. And that becomes our Earth space, our one planet. And so that was the delivery of the principal matter to our Earth space. Then we have more that transpires. So we understand that the energy that comes together to create that field has to have a balance. And that balance is coming from multiple directions, multiple strengths. And once they come into contact together and they have this common denominator and they start to interact, but there has to be a relationship, there has to be a balance, the magnetical gravitational relationship. We call this the NP junction, the negative and the positive. And so we find that the negative rotates counterclockwise and the gravitational positive rotates clockwise. And so we have these opposite rotations and they come together, but we all know that the Earth rotates in one direction. So depending on your point of view, if you're standing in the North Pole, you see the rotating hemispheres are rotating counterclockwise, and if you're standing in the South Pole, it's also rotating counterclockwise. So how come these two hemispheres rotate together, and yet we have one planet that rotates in only one direction? And that is because these higher energies have come together as an inertia field, and they've created a manifestation which we call physicality. And so it's on that physicality that we create our physicality. And so our physicality is riding on the physicality of the Earth space. And so when we look at our physicality, we have to understand that it is constructed the same way. So we see the Earth has two hemispheres. Well, you know what? Our brain has two hemispheres as well. And so now we understand that there has to be a uniform activity with respect to both of our creation, humanity, and the planetary, all made the same way because it follows the man-made laws. And those man-made laws are truthful. They cannot lie because they're coming from the universe. They come as principal matter. It's an energy pack, and as such, it's nicely parceled. So within that package, however, as it comes and interacts and creates this field, we see that there are different layers, there are different densities, and different things happen. And as a result of that, we have different things in our matter plasma dimensions. So some of these plasma dimensions are very gravitational, where they're physical, so you can touch and see them, but others are plasmatic, so they're magnetical. You can't touch them or you can't see them, but they are there. So they are part of the feedback and part of the feeding process, and they work together. And man is feedback dominant because we only see the one field. We don't see the inertia creation. We don't see that field as a product of inertia coming from two other fields. So we know that we can bring two physical things together and blend them together. But we can take two plasmatic things and bring them together and create a physical field. So we've proven that with the cups of life. So it's time to accept the reality that the inertia feeding of one is the combination of the smaller field with the larger field, which creates a balance. And so that creates a feeding of one. But which one? Because we find that there are three dimensions and they come together. They create more than three because we still have the first ones. And so that's why when we're looking at the surface to volume ratio, we find that these dimensions balance out and they create three feeding dimensions. But the feedback dimension is our experience. It includes the feeding dimension and the results of these feeding dimensions. And we don't lose the feeding dimensions in the creation of the product dimensions. And so we get a chance to witness this. So our observations are our feedback. And if we don't understand it, then we have to fudge it. And we say, okay, we believe our experiences. But that experience is the product that was created by our belief feeding. This is the belief that we have to incorporate into our understanding of our science. And we've had multiple opportunities to prove that. So instead of migrating towards our experience, we need to migrate towards our beliefs. But our beliefs need to be true. When our beliefs are being deceived, then strange things happen. And that's the difference between clean water and dirty water, because the water here represents exactly what we're talking about. Water is nature's solvent, and it creates this energy parceling unit where we have the two hydrogen and the one oxygen. So when we talk about the density, the hydrogen is significantly lower density than the oxygen. So the hydrogen is magnetical and the oxygen is gravitational, but the water molecule is around and it is in balance. It's a maggrav. So how do you get this balance to come out? So there are other factors at play. And so the water becomes a product of these factors that are at play. And so the first factor, of course, is that we have the gravitational conformation of hydrogen being the first element, the least dense. And then it converts its fingerprint into an emission spectrum, which is a color fingerprint. So we know it's hydrogen on Earth, or it's hydrogen on Mars, it's wherever is hydrogen. But what we are seeing is a gravitational tracking system like you get from your courier, and you know that it's come from somewhere. So what we relate to is the magnetical field of the sun, the magnetical field of the earth, and the magnetical field of the creator. And all of these come together, one plus another one, and they come together and they create more than three, because we still have the one and the other one and the other one. And so coming together, we have many more fields, and the same thing happens as we progress through the periodic table of elements. And so we see the oxygen doing the same thing, but the oxygen is more dense. So there's a migration somehow to go from the hydrogen to the oxygen. And that migration reflects the density difference between oxygen and hydrogen. So then we see that this is all part of the nuclear feeding inertia. So every density becomes a fragment of the complexity, and it's part and parcel of it. So we see the coming together of one dimension being in the matter state. We see the coming together of another dimension being in the dark matter state, and then we see another dimension coming together in the antimatter state, and they keep feeding. But the product develops and manifests as part of the nuclear field. And all together, we see the interaction of the plasma fields coming together. So that these fields are all part of the conservation of angular momentum. So we see that the angular momentum equals the moment of inertia plus the angular velocity. So it's a relationship of angular momentum, and it's inversely proportional to angular velocity. So the moment of inertia is conserved. The greater the angle, the less the velocity. So we have a gradient momentum. We see it as part of the rotating field where the energy comes from the higher to the lower. So that tells us there's a magnitude and a direction. So think of it like a cartwheel, or think of it like you're holding a ball on the end of a string and whipping it around your head. And you see that there's a gradient momentum as it goes around. And you balance that. But that momentum is translated into a density gradient because there's an inertia accommodation. So if the inertia were at zero, there would be no change in angular momentum. And that conservation of momentum then would be a catalytic conversion. So you can rotate that ball on the string around your head, and it will maintain the same distance away from you. But if you were to suddenly interrupt that rotation, say with your finger, and as the ball rotates around and winds around your finger, you'd find that density gradient increasing. And the string would get shorter and shorter and shorter. And if you weren't careful, eventually that ball will come so close to you, it might even hit you in the head. And wouldn't that be a better lesson? So, but because we maintain our intelligence, we maintain our density, then we have a magnetical consistency. And the electron-proton relationship and the electron-neutron relationship is done the same way. There's a relationship between the magnetical electron and the gravitational neutron. So the electrons rotate around the dense neutron, and it's consistent. So that consistency reflects a captured field. But that captured field has multiple layers. And so each of these layers get smaller and smaller, so they become more dense. And in the physicality, these captured fields represent not only multiple layers, but multiple densities. And then within them, multiple spheres. And there are many, many multiple spheres. So if we just look at the basic spheres and say, okay, well, by the color, what does it mean? So we find that the most dense are the violets, and the least dense are the reds. And then each one in between becomes a migratory field. So the green field is, shall we say, more dense than the red, but less dense than the violet. So how do we migrate? Well, it all depends on how things come together. So one of the ways we can do things is by blending. And so when fields come together from one system or from another system, they could come together and just put everything together, and we call it the black hole. Or they can spread out and become what we see the gravitational conformation of humanity, where we have 8 billion of us or more. And if we understand about life, so it's beyond humanity. We're talking about the horizontal and the vertical people, and the numbers are off the charts. Then we all understand that the gravitational conformation involves all of them, and they all follow the same rules, and they give us a diversity. And this diversity is very interesting. It's what makes life so interesting, fascinating. It's wonderful. For a lot of people, it's grounds for confrontation. And so all of this angular density represents kind of a falling. And so we have to understand that this falling is like an increased density, increased pressure, and of course, increased gravity. So this angular momentum equals the moment of inertia times the angular velocity. And so we go from emotions of happiness to emotions of anger, and we have to contain our excitement in both directions. So we are going through a whole process where, if you will, this momentum, it's like a folding action where the arms of the rotation come together. And so on the one side, when the higher drops to the lower, they fold into density. They're winding. But when they go on the other side, then they start continuing rotating in the same direction, but now there's an unfolding out of the density, an unwinding. So that folding momentum goes two ways. And that folding momentum is absolutely important with respect to our physicality. So it looks like a clock, but we have broken clocks. So some of these broken clocks are folding clocks, and some are unfolding clocks. But whatever they are, they're at least correct twice a day. And so every day, the time repeats. And as the clocks turn, they kind of create a sine wave during this migration, which means that every time the Earth rotates around its axis, which is one day, time also migrates. So today is not the same as yesterday. Today is more dense than yesterday. Maybe we can't notice it, but the Earth rotates and migrates towards density. And every time it rotates, it becomes more dense and more dense. The Earth rotates around the sun. It takes 1 year to rotate around the sun. Every rotation becomes more dense. So this year was not the same as last year and will not be the same as next year. Time also migrates, and so it becomes more dense. So over a period of time, and you see, well, how do things migrate? How do things move from the less dense atmosphere to the more dense water to the more dense solid? And then how do they move from the more dense solid back into the less dense? And that becomes a sine wave during this migration process. And it goes both ways. So now we see that when we look at the Saturn's rings, they are visible, and these rings are demarked with visible shadows. But clearly the body of the planet is different. So there are gaps. There's gaps between the rings and the planet. There's gaps between the rings. And these are different densities. So this is the winding and the unwinding of that rotating field. And whatever it is a product of these two other factors that come together. And that product is what we call an inertia field. So that creates this circular motion, which we maybe say is like a cartwheel or a tumblewheel, but it is a plasma field. So it's a coming together of the antimatter, dark matter, and the matter state. It's a three-dimensional, and they come together because they all have a common denominator. And that common denominator allows them to become more dense. And then at some point, they transform from the density of the plasma to the density of the physicality. And so the density of the physicality is more dense than the density of the plasma state. The physicality is the lowest energy state. But according to the periodic table of elements, there are degrees of density in the physical state. So we see there are degrees of density in the atmosphere, there's degrees of density in the liquid state, and there's degrees of density in the solid state. So with the auras, you know there are degrees of density in the emotional state. And so, in other words, to understand density, it isn't just circular, but it's a migration. And gravity seeks density. And this density operates within the Coulomb barrier. And so the maggrav is constantly in balance. That's what makes a maggrav. So if we stay within the Coulomb barrier, that's fine. But are we isolated from the rest of the universe? Or do we interact with the rest of the universe? So from our point of view, we don't see the connection. So without seeing that connection, maybe it causes us to be, shall we say, a little bit emotionally unbalanced because we tend to forcefulness. And so we don't understand that the forcefulness, which we interpret as aggression, is very dense, so therefore very gravitational. And it counters free will, which is magnetical. But there's another forcefulness, it's called determination. And since that determination supports free will, we know that the free will is gravitational, so the determination becomes magnetical. So the inertial outcome is based on our emotional forcefulness. And in either case, there's a balance between the magnetical and the gravitational. We have to understand this because we understand now how we have this dependency in our humanity civilization to maintain this contentiousness. So, we have this basic warmongering by race, color, religion, belief, or nationality, outright war. So this is not the way we were created. All what it says is that the density migration caused the creation and the manifestation of the earth space, caused the manifestation of our inner space and our physicality. It's our lack of understanding that created this manifestation of contention, dependency, not understanding how that product was made, not understanding that other field forces came together, and not understanding that the motivation of these field forces are the motivation of the motion, which comes from emotion. There is no rule. There is no commandment that says thou shalt be one color or another, and thou shalt be more equal than another. But there is a rule that says thou shalt not lie. And the reason you don't want to lie is because you don't want to be found out, and it helps your contentious dependency. But your dependency depends on your deception, and that's a deception to others. But you cannot deceive yourself. It doesn't matter how dense you are. It all comes down to the same thing. There's a core dependency. So there's a relationship in what we call the electron and the positron. There's a relationship what we call with the neutron and the proton. So it's just like you and your shadow. There's always a balance between the magnetic and gravitational field forces. You just have to figure out, in which direction is relevant for you at that time. Whether you're a scientist, whether you're a miner, whether you're a military man, or whether you are a peaceful man. And so we see that one of the big contentions is the hard-heartedness that we have on our planet, which comes from being devoid of emotion, devoid of empathy for the human, devoid of empathy for the horizontal people or the vertical people, just a sheer love to abuse, even to the point of being abused. So, gold diggers are not restricted to just miners or men. It's a universal hard-heartedness. So it's emblematic of the greed. So what we see is that greed is a magnetico-gravitational relationship. But it operates within a field of a magnetico-gravitational relationship. Those two fields are the constructs of the inertia fields that create the product. So whether it be an emotion or whether it be a physicality, it manifests. And whether it manifests in the plasmatic state or manifests in the physical state, those two still play the game. So you can choose to agree or not to agree. So last week we talked about how when you take your hands and align them in such a way that you can see that each finger represents a field strength, and you start at the lowest strength and with the physical, and you move on up. And in order to move on up, you have to drop one and pick one up. So you eventually get up to your soul, which involves nothing physical. So during the daytime, the awake time, we are very physical. When we sleep, we drop the physicality and we work in the plasma state. So the realm that is a combination of the soul state and the body state is also a MAGRAV condition. So the field that we operate in contains various positions within that field. And we can migrate through different energy states. So we can migrate from the physical state through the intuitive, through the astral, through the spiritual. Well, the earth can do the same thing. And so as we realigned our hands to incorporate the difference between the earth state and the man state, we find that the Earth migrates from the Earth's core, and it migrates to man's condition because the Earth has to be here first, so before the man comes here. So our position on the Earth is migrating between a connection from the Earth's core to our soul. So there are connections in between. So in order for us to maintain our physicality, we need to be balanced between our soul and our emotions. But if we become too hard-hearted, then we become more like the Earth's crust, become more like a stone. So when we talk about the stairway to heaven, we don't have to just go step by step. There are many steps in between. So as we're going from the simple and unstable to the complex and stable, this is a density step migration. And through that, time also migrates, but within the range. So whatever step you're on is between the upper step and the lower step. And so this is the stairway to heaven, and you can make heaven wherever you want. So is the density hardening your heart, or is the density contributing to your strength? Not the same. Not the same. So understanding the direction of the flow, when we look at if we have aggressive chakras, whether that's in our mental condition or it's manifest in our physical condition, understand that operates within a range. But the same is true with the passive chakra. So we can be passive in our thinking and passive in our actions. But if we have a responsibility, we have to be active within that range. We have to be responsible within that range. And so we can address our emotion within that range and understand that the humanity has to create this inertia shielding to shield ourselves from the hostiles, from aggression, from environmental harm. So it's a two-way street. It's the natural creation, which is the maggrav plus the magnetical, and the natural decay, which is the maggrav plus the gravitational. One is the emission intensity, one is the absorption intensity, and there's a balance. So that balance is a product of what you give your time and attention to. So that becomes part of your intention. And to understand that that intention is a maggrav, and it's an inertia field. It's a charge inertia. What are you feeding magnetically? And what are you feeding gravitationally? And what are you combining with? What are you making happen? You, what are you making happen? And how are you communicating that through? So, can you do good if you don't think good? Can you do good if you aren't good? Or what does it mean to be good? And is it good for you and your self-serving needs, or is it good for others? So we have to understand that being good for others fulfills our self-serving needs. Because otherwise, you are living in Hooliganville. And that becomes part of your earth space, your transmutation state. That becomes the convergence of the different fields. And each of these fields is a combination field, not just from the earth space, but from other space, another place, outer space, that outer space transmutation state, the coming together of good intentions, good thoughts, the warm-heartedness. So we work within a range. We work within a range of the universal community. It's on our earth space that we work within a tighter, more dense area. And so when we look at the migration of density, we just see what the context is with respect to our earth space, ignoring the fact that it also involves outer space. And this is going to come about because we are getting interaction coming through this black hole transmutation, where we have the magnetical gravitational balance on the pH in our physical state. We also have it in our transmutation between our plasmatic state and our physical state. And then we also have, of course, our interaction on the plasmatic state, where we have the balance of the magnetical gravitational fields on the pH scale, don't we? Because we have the same thing, the inertia of the mind, where that comes together, not only with the soul of the man, but the soul of the earth. We have to tune into that. So that becomes the soul of the physicality and inertia manifestation. So when those souls come together, then we can create the physicality of man on the physicality of the earth. So whichever way you want to add it up, 1 + 1 + 1 is always more than 3. And there's more than one equation to take into account, because it's the balance of these two equations, the soul of the earth and the soul of the man, that creates the inertia of the mind. And so we can see that because that's part of the roadmap to the plasma highway. So we have to understand that there is a deficiency, about 20%, from our feeding, because we're feeding and then we're feeding back. But that feeding back is robbing us because we are suffering from a density migration. We need to enlarge our schemes to understand that our density and the creation of our physicality, the creation of our emotionality, is all part of the grand scheme. And the rules are the same. And so we can migrate beyond our density. And so that becomes part of the learning curve, excuse me, to understand that the creation of the universe happens because of the existence of energy. So the energy is always positive, but the charge then reflects the motion. And in that motion, there's a direction. And if there's a direction, that means it's coming to or going from. So when we look at the universal order of creation of matters, the coming together of the three different matter states of different energies, and we know that they came together from something, and they're going to interact with something else. And so that creates another product field. So this is how easy it is for us if we understand that our physicality comes from our soul. And if only that soul would tune in and turn on to the energies of the universe and drop out of this resistance so we can receive that energy And then we can fashion the pattern to get that energy, because the energy always follows a pattern. So when we're looking at the migration, which is really a substitution, it's a transference of gravitational dominance. So at that point of substitution, the intensity equals zero and the outintensity equals zero. So what are you going to substitute? You are going to have a confirmation of what remains or a confirmation of what dissolves. So that substitution point is within the black hole field, but you don't just stay there. You keep moving. Excuse me. So you can step through all the various densities and understanding that going from the monatomic to the polyatomic, from the atomic field to the plasma field, from the Coulomb barrier to beyond. It goes in both directions. And you can step through these densities, but you don't have to step through one step at a time. You can step from the physical field to the plasmatic field, and from the plasmatic field back to the physical field. So we are coming to the conclusion of an era, the Sanya beyond era, where we've seen the Earth-space consistency, regardless of where we are on this planet. There's gold in them, there are hills. And so what we see with respect to our understanding is that we are just small spheres of density. And with that density, it creates baggage or burrs, which cling to us. So we see that this Earth-space consistency, and it is a reflection of our addled little brain. And we see the outer space consistency, which is being suppressed. This picture of our physical dimensions is on the wrong side of the transmission dimension. And our emotion and our soul understanding is on the wrong side of the transmission dimension. You just have to flip things around. Because when we flip things around, then we start to gravitate to the less dense, but the higher strength. There's a difference. So this is the pH maggrav, where the speed of rotation affects the transmutation transition. We see that with our maggrav reactors. Let's look at it with the blue planet here, where we see that the intensity and the outintensity are balanced. But within that range, we can have any coming together of the various dimensions. And they can move along and migrate from one pH to another pH. We know that because we have pure water, we have polluted water. We have beautiful parks, and we have dumps. So the pH of peace on this planet has many points on the field strength of the dove. And that's what we need to do. We need to bring together the great minds, the great scientific minds, to bring together the plasma science, do the research, because we've only scratched the surface. The peace and prosperity is on the other side of the watershed, and we have crossed that watershed. So now it's actually much easier. As we've been doing the transmutation flight training tests, we will have one more session from this round of 3. But the difference is the equipment that we used at the beginning is now obsolete. We have migrated to another energy level, and it is truly marvelous. So now we have to let the world know because the world wants to know, because the world wants peace and prosperity. That's what they say every day. And they don't get it because the range transition transcends this inertia field of the transmutation dimensions. So the laws of conservation govern the covalent, trivalent, tetravalent bonding attributes, but it creates a lot of possibilities. So this containment of this inertia is manifest through the contention of equality. Not to say that someone is more equal than others, because the soul of the man cannot be abandoned nor compromised. And so the color of man is based on the integration with the soul of the man. This is the integrity of man. And the integrity is at the core. So we need to set up our antennas where we have this message feeding and this feedback manifestation migration. So we can navigate by the transmission tuning transition, where we select one force which is magnetical and balanced by the force selection of another gravitational force. So the resulting selections feed the MAGRAV manifestation. This selection manifestation is predetermined because it's determined by you being able to enlarge your schemes of reference. You can also encapsulate the schemes of density migration. So your emission of intention consistently affects the standard folding deviation, whether you're winding or unwinding, and leaves no room for war by choosing the peace dome of intention. So the transmutation manifests in balance with the peace dome, and it becomes part and parcel of the range of the whole universal community. So our anchorage, yes, it's the soul to the blood and the blood to the earth. And so it reflects our gravitational density, but you decide, you hot-blooded or warm-blooded or cold-blooded. So that affects the peace and harmony within your greater oneness. And so you have a control over that. And so we have to augment our reality to understand that there's a flux and a flow towards, to, into, within, through, out of, and from every charge, every form, all mass, matter, or substance. So we can intensify and extensify what we are. We are and we need to be connected. That connection supports the flux of continuous change, and that connection is hooked on life. 586 weeks, we brought the Knowledge Seekers workshops to bring you the greater oneness. But that greater oneness message has been coming for millennia. So it just appears here on Easter that we suddenly are transcending the limitations of nuclear science. Compared to the migration of time, it appears like it's happening suddenly. But through our generation, it's not happening suddenly enough. So let's understand that we are on the verge of a technology release. Let's understand that can't sleep when our beds are burning. So this planet needs a scientific rescue, a financial rescue, and a political rescue. And it's a convergence of these forces that are coming together and migrating in density to increase the field strength, to understand that all of us share this planet. This is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute Teachings on Plasma Science. So let's welcome all the beautiful knowledge seekers from this planet and beyond to learn about the new selection process of the new plasma science. There's a World Peace Treaty. You have a chance to choose it. Sign it. Sign it with true intention. The more we sign, the more dense we get. The more dense we get, the more strength we have. So is the momentum of inertia a paradigm starter or a stopper? So where self-importance is that winding river of the inertia of adulation, or is the peace dome of outer space an umbrella, or is it a fountain? Is the inertia of the present governed by the dimensions of history? We talk about that today on Easter. How do we impart the importance of self in a universal context? Migrating towards density retards the progress of the new physical transmission dimensions. So plasma science is delivered daily via the Peace Dome and our wish in a practical exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new outer space age. I hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Again, it's a lot to sort of comprehend and understand. I know when I did the transmutation in the reactor group, I didn't have any consideration of spinning or black holes or anything. And I believe it's all within ourselves. But the foundation, with whatever they used, was able to trigger something. And I don't know how. I haven't been able to replicate that experience again in the same way. But I know that this group of 5 or 6 people will experience something similar, maybe even more. And I was thinking, imagine if the religions wouldn't have misled us to abuse us. This world might have taken a totally different path in a way. But maybe it had to be set that way for certain reasons. I don't know, but we didn't have to go this way. But now that we're in it, we need to extricate from it. Still use the physicality without a doubt, but also expand this energy understanding. So let's see if any of the participants have a question or a comment they'd like to make. Maybe something in the workshop you want to share, or maybe one of your own experiences. I think they all got it, Alex.
Yeah, they do. They have been here a long time, and we have some newcomers as well. But the thing is, you cannot continue doing something and not learn something from doing it. That's pretty near impossible. So just the sheer presence is teaching us, and that's the whole point. Life is for learning. So, how much do we learn? Well, what's the limiter? What's the limiter to that action? And each of us has different limitations, but the ultimate limitation comes to our belief, because that belief is the truth, and nobody knows the truth better than you. So if you're lying, if you're successful in your deception, if you are successful in maintaining that deception, so which requires more energy, maybe you brag to someone, but the truth within knows that you're a liar and knows that you're violating universal law. And that's the harsh reality. And you can ignore that because it's a slow migration to the hardening of the heart. And it will continue. If you already have a lack of empathy for humanity, you're well on your path to becoming a stone. And that is the end. So does the means justify that end? Only you know the truth. And that becomes the key issue.
Yeah, I have enough trouble corralling myself. I don't need to worry so much about what the others are doing. I think this whole project is about finding out about ourselves and what we understand and what we're capable of. I'm not so much interested in finding out who's lying or who's not. And as we heard in the last workshop, the soul is not fooled. He mentioned this very wealthy man who had a beautiful wife and beautiful children, but he still wanted to possess things that didn't belong to him. And the soul of the wife apparently felt that and created a cancer in the right breast and so on and so forth. So I don't think the souls are fooled as much as we think we're fooling them in the physicality. He gave a couple of examples about that in the past.
That's true. But if we understand what cancer is, it's a migration towards density. So the reason that we're doing that because inherently we believe that there's no other solution. So the migration towards density ends up being in a what do you call it, a strategy, right? Exit strategy.
Exit physicality.
Well, exit your situation, right? I'm a prisoner in the physicality. How do I extricate myself from that prison sentence? And so we find that it's because we allow the prison keepers, the wardens, to have the luxury of the belief that they can do that. And as long as we reinforce that, then they will reinforce their own. And it's not enough for them to learn from the consequences of that, because in order to carry on what they're doing, they have to migrate towards density as well. So they become part of the problem. Like, think about this. The prisoners are in jail, and the prison guards are guarding the jail. In order to do that, the prison guards are also in jail. So who's not in jail? The prison guards or the prisoners? So the truth is that they're both in jail. So why do
Yeah.
we have to do that? And it has to do with our lack of understanding that there's a universal law. And as long as we ignore that universal law, it is inevitable we migrate towards hardness. So is that the only direction? No. And that's the whole point. So how do we impart the importance of self in a universal context? Well, we have to look at the universal context and how it functions and govern ourselves accordingly. Carry on, Mark.
Yeah, I was thinking of that Supermax prison in El Salvador where they have a lot of their own population in there, and apparently they're accepting from others. And I know we can do something to alleviate those conditions within those facilities. Whether it's in the United States, there's so much abuse going on in there, putting people in solitary for years and the rest of it. So I'm looking forward to the time when we can elevate, even though they're prisoners and they've done something wrong, we can create a better condition and probably teach the plasma science within the institution, as many of them have learned to play chess or learned to play bridge or other things and actually can do quite well. even compete with people that have been playing for years and years. So I'm looking forward to when we can elevate the souls that are incarcerated, let's say, for whatever reason, or they've joined a certain gang or other things, and they've made some mistakes, and now they've done some wrong things. But I think we can correct this, and there are millions within the United States as well as in many, many other countries. We can't even imagine the conditions and what goes on.
There are those who think that we're in a prison planet.
Yep.
So, if we were to do a jailbreak from this prison planet, why wouldn't these incarcerated men or women also have a jailbreak? It stands to reason, doesn't it? Why would you have one and not the other?
So I believe we'll be able to reach out and touch many, but the commandments didn't work out so well, did they? I think they're taking a different approach now. We're not going to teach the physicality to reach the understanding of the soul. We're going to elevate the soul, and that's going to teach the physicality the correctness. It didn't work out so good, as I said earlier, especially the one thou shalt not kill. Yeah. So we're moving into a whole new understanding across the board: wellness, science, space travel, energy production, and all of the offshoots that come out of those disciplines.
So, Mark, I want to thank everybody for allowing me to continue to present. I hope you're enjoying this series. We're coming near the end of the Advanced Inertia series, and I'm hoping that the message that two fields come together to create a product field, I hope that message is getting through because that's the whole drumbeat from the Inertia series. And I'm hoping that next week is going to be, shall we say, a lot of fireworks, but on the peaceful side.
Yeah, I was just looking in the transcript about what he said about you don't need any wormholes and black holes and transmutation system. It's been within us. We called it a dream. Now that dream is a reality, which we deny to ourselves. So I think the denial factor is, if you say you're right, you're right. If you say you can, you can. If you say you can't, you can't. So I think it's up to each one as an individual to stop denying this dimension of energy that we're so involved with that we don't realize it. I mean, from taking 80% of our energy from the universe for traveling across the universe when we sleep, and so many other things. Communicating with the children or relatives on that zero time communication line, having that image of the mother that we miss, or so on and so forth. So we've been doing a lot of it, but it just isn't popular. In other words, it's not, everybody's not talking about it. So as they do, I think the whole humanity will experience this. And again, it's being gifted to us in a way, especially with the feeding, to move you away from killing. Even though I never considered plants or animals a part of that killing process, I thought it was our right. Again, going back to the books, holy books, which gave us that dominion over everything. But now we're really here to serve the creation, not to so much take from it. But again, it's for each one to explore and understand for themselves. I don't think I can convince you of that till you convince yourself, in a way, or show yourself or understand through your own understanding that this is the process of creation and servitude of the others, that they do better. You're there to serve them in so many ways, which is a hard lesson for most of us because we've been so ingrained into taking and storing and not sharing. But it's moving. It's moving slowly, but it'll move in a much, much bigger way. Anyone else? Is there somebody else who'd like to add something? A comment, a thought, a question that might have been on your mind? Alex is more than willing to entertain and share. Maybe as we gain more confidence, people will open up more. I don't know, but it's fine. We're all here. We're all connected as I see it. And if you're not using your voice, that's fine too. I think when you go into space, you won't have that mouth in the energy dimension, and you'll be communicating through the emotion.
Well, let's remember that everybody has to convey that message on their own terms, how they understand it, and maybe they have to make it even simpler for some people. Now that's not a condescending comment. That's just a reality. That, I mean, people have different education, and you get into a different environment, and you have to tune it accordingly. But as long as you understand the message and the meaning of the message, if you think in those terms, then you will get there. Um, it's like walking. If you have to visualize, putting one foot in front of the other foot, that really slows the process down. But if you look at your destination and you say, well, I have to go there, you don't think about putting one foot in front of the other. You just go and you get there. And so regarding the environment, that affects how you go there and get there. So we do that in our physicality. We have to do that in our social interaction. And I think we're all realizing that there's a lot of deception in the shall we say, social community, and it's
Yes, there's a lot of peer pressure. Most people want to be overheard saying what they think is acceptable to be said and not buck the trend or have the mob sort of insult you and the rest. So, but it will come. There absolutely it will appear, and people will, especially when they start feeding and doing other things, and they're wondering, how is this happening? I'm not eating, but yet my stomach is full. So I think we'll see more and more of this as time goes on, as these beautiful systems are introduced to humanity.
it was disconcerting to me to hear Mr. Kesh talk about the possibility of getting censored on platform X. I didn't even think that that would be possible, considering all the braggadocio that I've heard coming from the Muskhouse. But if that is in fact in the cards, then I think it shows a retroaction.
Yeah, I think he's more on top of the teachings than maybe we are, as he has a couple of senior Iranian scientists working on his team. And as Mr. Kesh indicated, they watch all of the workshops very
Yeah,
closely.
Alex, because their true nature is all scam. I mean, they just did all that to get power. Their true nature is scam. So it's not surprising if they do that, and it shouldn't surprise anyone.
No, but what we do want to see is that scam be exposed, and they will do it
Right,
on their own.
right. But it's just people are gullible and they keep buying into them. That's the thing. They're gullible and they keep buying into all they do. Once a lie is a lie, you can never, they can't change it. I mean, they're creating an environment for the foundation to be known, which is a blessing in disguise, but the true nature of what they're trying to do is still nefarious.
Well, like most people, I've been forced to log into the X platform to see Mr. Kesh's postings, but that's about the only redeeming factor. So the rest is indictment of the human condition.
And of course, I'll just share this more recent post. I think this was on the 18th. And you know, when I was reading the books, I remember, well, again, I'm not sure. He said most of the universe is made up of dark matter. And here, a potential dark galaxy, one made primarily of dark matter, may have been spotted in the local universe. Mr. Kesh goes on to comment about this: materials and galaxies cannot be made of dark matter and be considered as creator of black holes. We also put that link to the paper, which is going to work in tandem, I think, with the new paper that's coming out, the cosmic ray understanding. But I had remembered from one of the books that most of the universe is dark matter, but not perhaps the creation of materials and galaxies. It's a transitional matter, as I understand it. And again, what looked to our side of observation as black, be it matter or galaxy, this color of observation is simply orientation line of observation and could and is matter to another observer of different position and magnetic field strength. So based on your field strength and your observation point, as he said with the car, when it's coming at you and you see the headlights, it's gravitational, but as the car passes you and you see the tail lights or the red lights, that's magnetical in a way. It all depends on your point of observation. So again, Ike, I think you're more blessed than Elon Musk, even if he is the richest man in the world, because you probably understand more about the creation than he does. So we, in a way, have to have a bit of mercy on these people. And I know Mr. Kesh said that some of these world leaders or some of very diabolical people will actually be quite an asset to the foundation once they're turned, and once they've come into the deeper.
That's true, and I believe in that. I'm not even forcing on it. They will have to come around at some point. They're just an asset for us now.
Yeah.
Well, there's something I want to mention. You're talking about dark matter. Mr. Kesh said is the principle, right?
Yeah, he said that black material, the nano coating, is that dark matter. And as I understand it, the transitional matter or the dark matter has huge gravitational fields in it, where the principal matter can actually go through the transitional matter into the matter state, or it can go directly back and forth. Again, there's more that I don't understand at this point than I do understand. But as he said, Ike, with this planet, we could have easily gotten rid of this planet. But they had patience and thousands of years of time to bring us to this understanding. So can we give the same? Can we afford the same to some of these people like Musk and others? Like the Pope, perhaps, and others? I don't know. I think we can, because they're all connected and they're all part of the creation in so many ways. It may take them time to elevate, but even once they get into the universe, as I understand it, they may not have gone too far out of this even solar system, because we had where we sort of interacted with some of the prophets of the past in some of the sessions earlier on, I think in 2024. Are you going to punish a child that doesn't understand? Not really, even though some people do publicly. But I think we're more forgiving, or we're not really forgiving, but more accommodating, let's say, that we can, again, the stronger feeds the weaker. So that's our position, is to elevate them, even if they go above our level of elevation, which is fine.
So we don't want to be the magnetical to their gravitational. In order for us to feed and to emit, we have to connect to another gravitational field, and that's our soul. So They have to connect to their soul. That's as simple as that.
Any other points, comments, questions, disagreements, perhaps? And of course, this is another point that the Christians all missed, was the gift of the three wise men to the Christ child. And if you can incorporate this into your life, it's easier said than done. Thinking good, speaking good, and acting good, you create a beautiful shielding, and in a way, you're not offending so much, because I think even our thoughts can create those plasmas. Maybe you have someone has done something wrong and it's a hate, and we look at Mr. Kesh, even the one that poisoned him, or other situations where he invited them back to be part of the foundation, to illustrate the next book. I don't know if I could bring myself around to that. I'd want nothing to do with that person ever again. Almost banished, but Mr. Kesh seemed to be so open to sharing. So again, practice this understanding, and it's for you to apply it to yourself of the three wise men. And of course, I think as you do that, you'll be proud of the work you do, and you'll be proud of the person you are, and you'll be proud of the difference you're making. So these two combinations, I think, are very important. The thinking, speaking, and acting. And again, it's much easier, like the commandments. They were easily delivered, but they certainly weren't fulfilled. But now we're taking a different approach, elevating the soul, touching, reaching the soul. As Mr. Kesh said, that's what these monthly sessions have developed, that we're able to now reach the soul of the man through these systems, which will elevate the physicality, rather than giving an instruction in the physicality and then hoping the soul will reach the level of understanding of the soul of the man, which didn't work out so good. And I think that position had to wait until the communication systems were in such a development phase, even though I think that was gifted, as we heard earlier about Colonel Corso and some of the things that he channeled off into manufacturing and other companies to develop some of the alien technology or something. We had to wait to get to this point that the communication system would be worldwide, instantaneous, and be able to reach all. As Mr. Kesh was saying, he would just like one channel on the X satellites, the Wi-Fi system, or some of the Chinese satellites, to start changing the whole structure on this planet. And again, it's a gift. I don't think it's anything we've done to develop it, as we know.